My name is Issac Flyer, and today I'll be talking about three different things. I'll be talking about limiting beliefs, mindset, and imposter syndrome. We'll be talking about them in those orders because each one of those is a precursor to the next. Essentially, you have to have these limiting beliefs and thoughts, these negative thoughts and whatnot, that ultimately over time will create a set way of thinking, which becomes your mindset. And then over time, with that particular mindset, it will create, and you can develop with these forms of insecurity, a imposter syndrome or phenomenon. So for starters, I just want to kind of go into what limiting beliefs are. And it's kind of ironic because the things that I'm talking about, to you guys today, I experienced all three of these leading up to this talk with my own limiting beliefs of this presentation, or my mindset of if I can do this or not, or that imposter syndrome if I feel like I should be the one to be up here, conveying this message. So for a limiting belief, let's start with just the basic understanding of one of the definitions, which is a negative thought or belief that can hold us back and prevent us from reaching our goals. So for me, an example, leading up to this talk, the common thoughts that kept running through my head is, can I do this? What if they don't listen to what I have to say? What if I forget what I have to say? And all these thoughts just keep polluting and badgering into my head, which ultimately, if not handled in a proper way, would affect my, opportunity to come up here and present this to you. So just curious if anyone would be able and willing to share any of their own limiting beliefs, whether it's with relationships or work or whatever it may have to be, anything at all.
Leadership, man.
Leadership.
Like, why would somebody follow me? Like, how could I be a leader? What do I know? You know what I mean? That's my own thing that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, fair. That's a solid limiting belief. Another one I had when I had my first job, I was thinking to myself, like, am I qualified enough to do these kind of things in that nature, So one thing that I found as a consistency with every belief that we have when it comes to the negative mindset is that each one of these are just thoughts. They're simply just thoughts. We create the reality behind them to give the meaning towards them and whatnot. But essentially, understanding that these are just thoughts take us and go a long way in understanding how to navigate and work through them. And to understand that something like a pen or a laptop or a table are indisputable. Universally, we can all understand and agree that this is a pen. This is a computer. But your thoughts, they're all subjective. We all have different views on how we interpretate our own thoughts. So because of that, that's a good way or a mindful technique to understand what is considered real and what's not considered real. And just that subtle awareness and putting yourself in mindful or meditations in one form, what they call it's a witness state. So essentially what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position where you take a step outside of yourself and you're observing it as if you're watching a movie and you're watching your own movie. So you're not indulging into your beliefs and thoughts and consuming them. And it's just more like observing what they are. Oh, okay, I'm having this thought and whatnot. So this brings me to our first lesson. Yeah, of course, do your thing. Which is become aware of the negative thoughts you are having. I'm not saying that you need to be mindful of literally every single negative thought you have or every thought you have, because ultimately we have so many thoughts in a given day. But it's a good practice and a good tool to understand when you're having a negative thought from a positive one. So something that I do, again, leading up to this talk, in a given day, I try to assess just 10 negative thoughts that I have within that given day. And by doing this, again, I'm invoking a new habit within myself that puts me in this position to be like, oh, okay, I just had a thought that I'm nervous of forgetting my lines. But rather than consuming myself with these thoughts and feeling like, oh man, that's actually going to happen, I go into this witness state and I observe and I say to myself, okay, I just had a negative thought. It's a more neutral standpoint, observing it from the outside rather than indulging in becoming that thought, and understanding that, again, these are just thoughts and they aren't your reality unless you make them your reality, which pertains to every aspect of life. Obviously, we're all here for like business purposes, but a message that I want to convey is these tools and practices really benefit every aspect of your life. In that, before you go into a business experience or setting where you want to expand or change careers or whatever it may be, there's these precursors, these little tools that you need to invoke within your life that will ultimately get you to making those bigger decisions. But anyways, another tool that I use when it comes to having these limiting beliefs and kind of putting them in check is, for every negative thought that I have that I can become aware of, I bring up 2 positive thoughts. So whatever it may be, just to really combat and counteract that negative thought, to again reinforce and influence that you do dictate the thoughts that you have rather than having them dictate you. It's good to understand that we have this challenge where we think our thoughts, it's like a dictatorship, that every thought we have, we must believe, we must follow it. But ultimately, like what I try to enforce in my life and then, in my clients' lives is to reminding them that it's more important to have more of a collaborative, democratic, there it is, relationship with yourself when you collaborate with each part of yourself, and understanding how important these thoughts go through your brain and how they influence you on a scientific level, understanding that you have over 80 billion neurons flooding through your head every day, like little ants just running around. And literally every thought that you have creates a neural pathway that cement those little ants and those neurons together, which then becomes your thought, becomes the thought pattern in the way you are relating yourself to the external world. And really enforcing again that because we're so influenced by our thoughts, if we can create new habits like the ones with combating positive or negative thoughts with these positive ones, or becoming more mindful of the limiting thoughts that we have, we can really transform again the way we perceive the world and perceive ourselves to that world. Which brings me to my second lesson, which is your thoughts create your reality. And I know it sounds pretty simple, but digest that. Really think about what that means, because it's very literal. Our thoughts create everything you see. Every experience you see is based on what goes on in here. So because of that, you have the opportunity to perceive the world in a positive light or a negative light. Sometimes we run into this trap where we think the world is happening to us rather than for us, because we're so influenced by everything that goes on, and then we try to counteract everything and try to manage everything. But ultimately, if we could understand that we have the power and we hold the power within our own thoughts and emotions, then we kind of control our world, and you become a ruler of your world in the way that we all want to be. And understanding again that the external world doesn't have to influence us internally. That if we're more sound internally, then ultimately we can have a more favorable experience in life. So I want to do kind of a demonstration. So I was hoping that everyone could just close their eyes for just a couple minutes, if you guys don't mind. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I find it more effective. But we've all heard and maybe seen Snow White, right? And the 7 dwarfs. And I was just curious if anyone can name a couple of those dwarfs. Grumpy. Dopey. Happy. Doc? Sleepy. Doc. Sleepy. Sneezy. Probably not creepy. He probably didn't make the list. But what do they all have in common?
They end with Y.
They're small. Yeah, they do end up with Y. Didn't think about that. No, good. They're all us. They're all emotions. They're all different parts of us. And understanding when you can compartmentalize each thought or each emotion in that light, it really, again, takes you out of consuming yourself with that particular emotion. So if you're angry, rather than saying, oh, I'm an angry person, it's just a part of you that's angry. You know, if you're sleepy or dopey or whatever, any emotion that's going on, arguably they're all just one person. And if, again, when you put yourself in this position where you can take one of those emotions or thoughts and put them in front of you like you're at a table with them, it's so much more easy to have a relationship with them rather than being so consumed with them in like putting yourself in the clouds. You know, how many times has anyone ever been in a situation where they don't think clearly because they're so consumed with their thoughts? But then in hindsight, when they take themselves out of that situation and they're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? I could see more clearly because you have the perspective now to see it. Essentially, that is the tool that I use with myself to regulate my own emotions and my thoughts when it comes to, again, relationships or business. I take each part of myself and I have, again, this democratic or relationship or this collaboration where they're all sitting down just like you guys, but it's all just me. But if you, again, can see yourself as each one of those, it makes it so much easier to have these relationships and negotiate with them in ways that you want, of finding the purpose of why they're there and understanding, again, that you choose if they want to be there or not. Which brings me to my third lesson. And I've been kind of reiterating this message. Collaborate with yourself. You want to find a way to negotiate with your thoughts and your inner emotions, because ultimately these are the things that dictate how you are going to respond in your business settings. You know, I know today perhaps there might have been like this expectation that I might be providing useful information that might help each and every one of you of learning how to navigate in the business industry of real estate that you're in. But ultimately, I take it a step further and deeper, because you can't attain what you're looking for if you're not sound emotionally and mentally in here. It all starts here. It's like a car. You know, you can see this beautiful car on the outside, but if the engine isn't there or isn't working, the car is not going anywhere. Humans are the same way. We all look beautiful on the outside, but if we're not working on the inside internally, and we're not regulating and understanding ourselves and our thoughts and having them work for us rather than against us, we're not going anywhere. We'll be stuck in that same place with these constant, repetitive, negative thoughts that will debilitate us and hinder our ability to move forward in any aspect of your life. And again, it's not just business, it's every aspect of your life that is so influential with these tools, to where you can have a better relationship with your family, with a romantic partner, in business, with yourself. Because at the end of the day, like, you are the only one that's going to be with yourself through the whole course of life. And if that's the case, then you might as well figure out how to work with yourself rather than fight with yourself the entire time and way through life. You know, so that kind of concludes just the end of the limitations and the limiting beliefs. If anyone had any questions or comments or remarks or whatever might have just came up when I was talking, if anything stood out to you guys, please speak now. I really want to maybe take a couple minute break, because I want you guys to digest what I have to say, because each section that we talk about is important in its own right. And I don't want to go into each section and just translate or just go right into the next one so fast to where you forget to, process this particular section. So, we could sit here, or we could ask questions.
I was just wondering, how has this influenced you personally? What have you seen that was a limiting belief that you overcame, and how that has impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, one of the main limiting beliefs that I had, just again for the context of this talk, was just I had this constant repetitive feeling of oh man, they're not going to listen to what I have to say. I'm going to forget what I have to say. What if what I say, I sound like an idiot? All these different views that I am going into this fear-set state of mind was really influencing my decision to even come here, and that translates again to other aspects of my life. Or if when I went to college, they told me to write applications of things of my own personal experiences of life. And then I just thought okay, well, I have nothing interesting to say. I lived a boring life and all these things, So it put me in this negative headspace that ultimately didn't allow me to at least pursue and try, So Those are kind of limiting beliefs that I had. But again, the way it influenced me ultimately, again, was invoking these tools within myself. It really helped me perceive life in a different light. Because again, like, I think the most important thing that I believe of what I said is that, like, the external world dictates how we are. And I'm finally at a place where I could recognize that the thing that happens is based on the way I perceive it. So if I could remind people of that, is to, like, you control that. You really can control the way you see things and experience things. It goes so far. I touch upon it a little bit in mindset, because any situation, like the rain, waking up late, whatever it is, it's an opportunity to dictate how you will perceive that particular situation. So if everything is negative and it's like, oh, of course it's raining, of course I woke up late, of course someone cut me off, that is the life you're going to live in here. And it's just like this prison that you will experience if you can't see the positive in every situation. So it's changed every aspect of my life. Sorry, that was a lot.
How did this group find you and reach out to you to speak at this event? Like, you must have had some presence somewhere.
So I mean, for me personally, like, I work with a lot of clients that have had their own, like, businesses. Particularly my individual clients that I work with are people that are in the medical field, in the medical practice, so they open up their own businesses in that. But I found, like, the things that I applied in my life were getting in the way of these individuals themselves when it came to thinking of creating a new business or expanding their business, because it had nothing to do with business. It had to do with the way they were relating to everything that happened. So I don't think there was a specific way of how they reached out to me. I think it was just synchronicity, where, like, the message that I'm here to express kind of just hopefully would resonate with you guys in a way that is more meaningful and deeper than just, like, the business relationship, and more just, again, internal.
I love your 7 words analogy.
Awesome.
You're feeling bashful, you're feeling dopey, go to doc to get happy.
Yeah.
And, allow yourself to be all those different characters, which, I find to be most of those, especially bashful and dopey.
Right.
So I appreciate that. I'm going to use that in analyzing.
Yeah, no, and again, it's an amazing way to take a step out and, like, seeing them for what they are. Because once you're consumed with them, again, in the business context, if you're going to get angry at a situation because it didn't go your way, you're letting that emotion and those thoughts control you, which ultimately are not going to allow you to attain whatever goal you're trying to attain in that particular business context. But if you can take a step outside of that emotion or that, like, the angry, and see it for what it is, you can make a more sound and rational decision that ultimately won't influence you in a negative way. Or having a client that doesn't want to, pursue your, your specialty, or, like, if they don't want us to buy a house or whatever it may be in this context, it's so easy to get discouraged and demoralized and feel like, oh man, like, it's a reflection of yourself, But if you put yourself in a situation where you step out and be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling dopey, and then you can see it for what it is, then you can have that conversation and be like, okay, why am I feeling sad? Oh, well, it's because they didn't buy the house. And then you have this conversation with it, and then you can kind of ultimately see that it had nothing to do with you. It was their decision, but it's nothing personal, which is another amazing tool to use, is to understand that, like, everything that happens is not happening to you. Again, it's for you. And if you take things personal, you're going to have a more challenging relationship going forward with things, where then you feel like, oh man, I don't want to feel a certain type of way because of this bad experience. Then again, might limit your ability to go out and pursue another client or whatever it may be.
It's like when you talk to a friend or family member about what your plans are.
1,000%.
And of course, they're always going, oh no, do you think that's a good idea? Oh, I don't know if that's, or blah, blah, blah. It's like they can always negative, and then almost talk you out of it.
Yeah.
And then you're going, but you're not telling me what I should do. You're just telling me what you don't think I should do. And you don't know.
And they don't.
It's a good idea or
And-
not.
and-
They think they're protecting you.
Exactly. And understanding that that is a projection of themselves. It's not a projection of you. It's the things that they've experienced that have limited them to go into that's maybe that same potential experience that says, exactly. So they're going to be like, oh, no, you can't do that. What they're not saying you can't do it. They're saying, oh, well, I haven't done it. And because I haven't done it, then you probably can't do it.
I wouldn't do it, so why
Exactly. So being mindful and understanding those simple like cues when someone is doing that goes so far, and understanding, okay, it's not personal, it's not me, it's them. And because I mentioned with the limiting beliefs and then like our thought patterns, it's so easy to be influenced by everyone else's thoughts externally that it will ultimately compromise yourself. And then you are now living a life, not a life you want, you're living a life that you think everyone else wants you to have based on all these external forces that are, hijacking you,
Yeah, you're talking to them because you want support and validation, and then you're getting the exact opposite, and then you now start doubting yourself. It's
Yeah.
I don't talk to anybody about my goals anymore because, that's always the influence. It's always the negative.
Yeah, and it's a good. I mean, on a personal level, when I have like individual clients, like we don't have to get into the details, but again, like it's important to understand like your surrounding circle, and limit the kind of conversation you have with people that aren't going to, build you up, or if they're going to be that anchor towards you, recognizing those individual people that are like that, so you can now dictate and choose the messages you convey to who you want around you, so that you know that, oh, Aunt Carol, when I talk to her, she isn't going to give me that uplifting or like that sense of validation or security. So we'll have a relationship, but not the one that, allows me to be more open. So it gives you this guard to understand and assess who should be in your life for what reasons in that way, I guess.
And on that note, if you're gonna, don't take advice from people who aren't already doing the things that you want to be doing. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. I mean, I wouldn't take advice about real estate investing from my mom. She's only ever bought our, primary residence she lives in. But I'm more than happy to, advice or talk goals with people who are actively where I want to be at. Otherwise, it's really just a waste of time, energy, and it's only going to discourage you. So.
Agreed. And it's so important. That's like the nature over nurture. Like I'm sure you can go either way on that, but like to understanding that you are a product of your environment. So having all you like-minded people here, having this experience goes so far for you guys, more than you will ever know, because you're around people that are like that, so you can confide in these people for your beliefs and whatnot, because they are in the same boat you are,
Actually, and then further, I did talk to my mom when I wanted to buy my first. It was going to be our first house hack, investment, and she was like, "No, don't do it. It's stupid. It's expensive. Whatever." I was like, "All right, whatever." But then you do it, and then you do it again, and whatever, your success, and then now it's the same people are the ones who are saying, "Hey, can you use some of our money to invest it?" And you know what I mean. So like,
Right.
you can actually help shape that as well by proving it and not really worrying about that.
You want to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Then you're afraid you're going to prove them right.
And I've actually never even cared about proving anyone wrong or anything like that. It's always just been like, okay, well, that's what I want. Who's doing that successfully? And I just have, like you said, basketball's one of the things, but like in real estate especially, like the best thing you could do is network and communicate with others who are doing what you want. Because a lot of people are very helpful, and even if you're afraid in person, like Bigger Pockets is where I started. Just like reaching out to anyone who was buying properties in the markets that I wanted to buy in, and just like talking to them about it. Obviously they're doing it, so it was a lot more. Yeah, that was a lot better than hearing everyone around me saying, "Oh no, that doesn't,"
Yeah, just because they wouldn't do it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. No, it's good. Like this is the purpose of this. It's more or less about me, but about opening up your minds and in your opportunities to understand that we all think the same. We're all the same in our own fears and doubts and whatnot, but to validate it more and be more open about it and make it more like a formal way of having these dialogues. It makes it a little less scary to feel like you're not the only one going through these things. So to have that message, it really is. It's a good opportunity to be like, oh man, I'm not the only one feeling this way, and it kind of breaks up that kind of like notion that, oh, I'm the only one, I'm not going to be talking about this, I'm going to keep it to myself, so yeah.
Well, picking up on that theme, I learned a long time ago from a mentor I had at one time. He said, you want to hang around people who you aspire to be like. So these are people at a higher plane, be it economic, philosophical, mental, psychological, that if you are looking up as opposed to looking flat or down, that you will then move in that positive direction because those people are more attractive by the very reason that you're trying to aspire to be like them. So you're moving up in the world, and I've taken that to heart for a very long time. I've got the gray hair to prove it.
Well, I would say the more you put yourself out there, you have, for me, before coming to things like this, I had that limited belief of, I don't know anybody, I just have a W-2 job and I only know the people at work. And I'm not going to go socialize with them and talk to them about real estate because none of them are going to know what I'm talking about. But it took me putting that limited belief behind myself because I didn't think I knew anyone. I'd be like, well, this person doesn't know me. They're not going to help me. And so I would tell myself that, and I would believe myself. And
Right.
that was the problem of limiting belief of what you're trying to say, is that when you hear it so much, you believe it yourself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what translates into the next subject of mindset. You know, that like having these limiting beliefs over time, it's like you don't even have to consciously have them anymore. They just become your way of thinking, your way of life, to where now they're just unconscious thoughts, to where that is your mindset about yourself, and that's how you view yourself. And it's more challenging to break that mindset like a habit than to recognize that they're just thoughts and then allowing them to just go in as thoughts rather than letting them influence that mindset, and then breaking that mindset is just a completely different, way of going through it. But one thing that I want to touch upon what you said of like you felt that you couldn't express to other people about your limiting beliefs, because what are they going to know about like real estate and whatnot? One thing that I found at least effective for me is to take a step outside of the comparison of maybe if you're talking about real estate and they're talking about a brewery, that even though they might be completely different things, you're both experiencing similar limiting beliefs for the fear of something, of not knowing enough. So recognizing that we all are experiencing those same limiting beliefs, and it doesn't have to be specific to a certain like job or whatnot. Again, it opens your market for people that you can confide in when it comes to this, because so anybody else?
Question. So
Yeah.
what about the opposite? How do you know when you're not experiencing limiting belief, but you're experiencing the opposite when like you're in your best flow states? How do you detail that? When do you be mindful that you know that you're in an optimal mindset state? I
So-
guess.
so you're- So like the sense of like confidence within yourself?
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of, again, when I touched upon like all the thoughts that go through your head on a given day, getting into this witness state puts you in this ability to observe the thoughts for what they are. So at first, it's really hard to assess a positive from a negative because we're not really thinking like that. We're just having thoughts, and then they just go and go and go. But the more you become more like specific on the form of thought you're having, I think it allows you to differentiate a limiting belief from just like a more fluid, healthy way
When it's mindset that everything is coming for you toward your way or something.
of thinking. And like another way of assessing if you're having like a limiting belief is when you have that belief, when you're in this witness state and you're observing the thought for what it is, you can ask, is this thought benefiting me? Is it bettering me? If it's not, and if it just floods you with more negative feelings or this hindrance of pursuing whatever you are because there's this thought that's in the way of you and what you're trying to attain, that kind of answers the question that, oh, okay, this is a barrier in my way. This is my limiting belief, because like we want to try to get to a place where everything becomes more smooth and organic, where like you have a flow of feelings for what you go and experience on a given way. And understand, like, it's not a bad thing to have a limiting belief. It's only bad when they start influencing the decisions you make. Like we're humans. We're all going to have negative thoughts or just thoughts in general. But to get to a point where we don't have to have them dictate our lives on the outside is essentially the key, is to pick and choose the thoughts that you want to help guide you to whatever you're trying to attain. You know.
Sorry for talking again, but like
Don't. God, I want you to talk. Like, that's the purpose of this, is just because a lot of people maybe don't have these types of dialogues all the time, you know? So, like, I really want you guys to, you know, like, think deeply, because that's how you get to what you're looking for, because it's inside. It's not outside. Whatever you're looking for isn't out there. It's in here, but it's hard to get there because we're so influenced by everything out there that we forget to check in on ourselves, you know? So please, talk away.
Yeah, so just back to real estate. I know there's like a mix, you know, some people have 100 rentals, some people have 10 years of experience or never done a deal before, but like limiting beliefs, especially when you get into real estate, are extremely common. It's like not unique because you've never bought a house, let alone an investment property. And most people who invest or try to invest or buy a house it's not an investment, it's actually like a net negative financially. But a limiting belief is really important in that regards as well if you use it like a roadmap. Like, what are the things that I need to learn to feel confident, as opposed to, oh, I can't do this. Well, why can't I do this? I don't know how to find deals. I don't know how to underwrite a deal. I don't know how to speak to lenders. Then you use it as a roadmap of what are the things you need to learn so that you can get to that point where you are confident. So it's kind of like a roadmap, especially in real estate, 'cause there are a lot of new things. So utilizing that as like a guide for like, okay, what are the things I need to learn, as opposed to, oh, I can't underwrite, I can't do this. Like, how do I learn how to do that, you know? Or who, not how, right? Who do I know that knows how to do that and I can work with? So, like, especially for anyone who's newer and never bought a deal, like, you're not going to know how to do, and I had that going into from regular conventional real estate to creative real estate. It's like, oh shit, I don't know all these different things and all these different concepts. Like, okay, well, I need to learn that. How am I going to learn that? What are the things I don't know, and then how do I learn that stuff? So back to like real estate, like mindset, I guess, limiting beliefs when you're starting your journey. That's big.
Yeah, no,
It's just overwhelming for everyone.
and I like
it's
what you.
overwhelming till it's not, you know. Like, that's literally what it is.
I like what you're doing here, because what I want to invoke again are just these principles and tools that, you know, we can all relate. But because you guys are the experts in this particular industry, you talking like this is such a prime example, because you can connect my tools with real estate to where you can make the examples more relatable to each one of you. You know, so like, I like what you're doing here and talking. You actually set me up perfectly for the next thing I was talking about, like in roadmaps and whatnot. So moving into mindset, again, understanding that if we don't have the proper beliefs or like thoughts and healthy thoughts and growing thoughts, then over time those limiting beliefs will turn into a negative mindset. So let's just get the definition of what a mindset is, or one definition, which is a habitual mental attitude that determines how you will interpret and respond to situations. So let's break that down. It's a mental attitude, just the attitude, and it yeah, come on in. No, don't be. And it dictates how you perceive every single situation. As I mentioned earlier, the way you wake up, the way you see the weather outside, if you're running late for work, if someone cuts you off, whatever it is, it's a perfect opportunity to evaluate that situation in either a positive or negative view. So if everything is happening to you like, this jerk just cut me off, it's a gloomy day, and then you resort right to that negative belief, then ultimately everything else that you're going to do on a given day, even in business, is going to be a negative mindset in a view where, again, if in the real estate context, if you've never sold a house or anything in that nature, you're going to be less obliged to want to put yourself out there and experience a sense of vulnerability, because now you have this common belief that has nothing to do with business, but just has to do with your habitual like patterns that you've created through every other part of your life, that now puts you in this stage where it's like, I can't do this, or what's the point of doing this? You know, a common example that I like to use in terms of mindset that actually happened a couple weeks ago. I was snowboarding with my father for Christmas, and going in, I had this expectation of, you know, enjoying myself, going fast and whatnot. You know, I'm younger and obviously my dad's older, but he's getting to the age now to where like he has to be a little bit more careful going down the mountain because one bad fall and, you know, he's not snowboarding anymore, you know. And I've noticed progressively throughout the trip, we started taking more stops. And then I became a little bit more impatient. And then I got so influenced by my own thoughts of like not attaining the expectation that I thought I wanted that everything else became bitter. Now it became just a little bit more cold outside. Now it became a little bit more wet. It's more damp. I'm waiting for my dad to come down the mountain and it's taking an hour just to get down. And it just, again, now everything around me is negative. And going into that situation with the tools of that witness state, I was able to take myself out of that situation and be like, whoa, let's take a step back. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? I'm here to be with my Father. Like that's the common goal. The sole purpose of why I'm here is to be with my Father. And when you have a higher purpose of what you're trying to attain, it really creates an opportunity for those little nuisance that happen to not deter you as much. So in business, again, before you go into any particular experience or opportunity, you want to remind yourself of that higher purpose, of why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you don't have that higher purpose, anything that you know, like go in on the way with like turbulence or any hiccups will ultimately deter you, because it's just a part of the process of any aspect of life, you know. So if you're going to be very temperamental through each emotional bump, it's going to be very challenging to attain that goal you want to attain, you know. So again, that prime example here, although it's not really, you know, relevant to your guys' situation, it's another just common situation that I found myself in, that I went from this cool expectation to horrible mindset to everything beautiful again, because it's, again, I'm here to be with my dad and everything else doesn't really matter, you know. So that really went a long way into kind of having this bigger picture, which brings me to lesson number 4.
Well, on that, it's also better to have a reply instead of a reaction.
Exactly.
So if you just reply to what's happening, that's one thing. If you have a reaction to something, then you're going down the wrong path.
Exactly, because there's going to be things that happen every single day.
Every single
So if you're reacting to every single one, it's going to be this emotional like burdens within yourself where you're going to be so mentally drained because you have to react to everything, as Aaron was saying. Yeah.
Well, I would say that in terms of real estate, everybody has a why. The vehicle to get there is just real estate. And so that's kind of what you're talking about is your why was to be with your dad.
Yeah.
But the vehicle to get there was to spend time with him. But you were hardly spending time with him because you wanted to snowboard and you took your mind off of that.
Exactly.
So that
Beautiful.
has a lot to do when I'm comparing it to real estate. Everyone has a why of why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so when they veer off to different paths, they think, oh, okay, now I'm like the shiny object syndrome. I'm doing something else. I'm doing something different than what my why was. But real estate is just the vehicle to get you to your why.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, you have your North Star. So always think about what you want.
Always, 100%. And even with my clients, when it comes to like relationships, it's the same thing with partners, is that like if you have this higher purpose of what are you trying to attain? We want marriage, we want kids, we want a more spiritual connection, whatever it may be. If you have that higher purpose, all the fighting or the bickering or getting to know each other throughout that process becomes less bigger, like magnified in a sense. They're just more minute things, to where if you don't have that purpose and you're just wanderously going through the relationship, every hit, every conversation, every interaction in a negative way will turn into this, well, maybe I shouldn't be with this person, or this isn't good. But if you can, again, take your step out, find that bigger purpose of why you're going through that, it allows you to, okay, you know, this is a speed bump in the road, but I'm not going to be deterred from my North Star, you know, so perfect. But yeah, so my lesson 4 is there's no point of having a mind if you're never going to change it. The purpose of our minds is to expand and to grow and to evolve. Like that is the sole purpose of it. So if you're going to be fixed in one mentality and one mindset, albeit it's more comfortable when you feel like you know what you're talking about, it ultimately will be your hindrance, because now you're not being open to the idea of other possibilities. If you're always fixed on the thought process of, I can't do it, then you're not even going to be able to learn how to get into a sense of challenging those thoughts and whatnot. A TV's purpose, to watch. A car's purpose, to drive. So these are the purposes, the fundamental purposes of these things. So for our mind, it's no different. The purpose of it, again, is to expand and explore and to question our thoughts. And when we were talking about how we have like roadmaps for this mentality, it's really important to understand like the way to get to that roadmap is by challenging your questions, or to question and challenge your thoughts. Any thought you may have. It's so important to ask yourself, well, why am I feeling that way? Why did I think that way? What is the point of that thought? Is it useful for whatever I'm trying to explore? And just getting into that notion of, okay, I have this thought, and now I'm going to question. Does it benefit me in any way? It allows you to just be simply open-minded just by doing that, rather than just accepting the first thought that comes into your mind and say, that is now my reality. You know?
And remember that if it's negative, it's temporary.
Any emotion is temporary.
Everything is temporary.
Most definitely.
Just mow straight through that.
Yeah, and I think that comes just with a gradual experience through life, is to take all these experiences and be in a position where it's like, whatever is happening to you isn't permanent. This too shall pass, you know? And to getting into that state really goes a long way, so you're not making decisions on that situation thinking that it's going to last forever. So you're going to make this dramatic
Reaction.
yes, you know. So challenging, again, your mindset for whatever it is, even if it's a positive mindset, you know, you want to get into the habit of just challenging all your thoughts in that nature, so you don't get stuck into this set way of thinking for everything, you know. And it's so beautiful how we actually have the capabilities of deciding the thoughts that we have, whether they're good or bad. You know, a good example is, who's afraid of flying? Okay, well, 70% of people I found are afraid of flying. So, why? Why are we afraid of flying? Yeah. What's the worst thing that can happen? Yeah. So when you're in a flight
Flotation.
and there's turbulence and everything, what is one thought you have? What's a more positive thought you have, like, of getting there?
Get there faster.
Or, yeah, get there faster. Or like, I want to live. Just get me to my destination. Just get me to my destination. I want to get there. And now you're seeing that the situation is influencing your way of thinking to a more positive way of thinking, rather than thinking of, oh man, are we going to die? It's like, I want to get there. I want to get there. And to understand that our brains have that capabilities of dictating what we think, it's an amazing thing, just on the concept of like this fear of flying, which is kind of brings me to my next point. It's interesting because here we are acknowledging that we are afraid of flying, and we're afraid that if we fail at flying, we'll die. And then on the flip side, when it comes to business or any opportunity in life, when we go into something that we're afraid of, more times than not, we don't do it. We let the fear influence us to not make that decision. Yet, if we fail at this particular situation in business setting, what's the worst that can happen? Consequences. Why? You know, you're like, oh, okay, well, I feel shitty about myself. Or, oh,
A bunch of money.
whatever it may be, yeah. So that's the consequence of failure. Yet, on flying, that failure is death. But we do it again. We'll fly again, even though we know failure in this context means death. But failure in this context just means another opportunity to try to navigate in a situation. So, what's not a failure? Well, it's more or less not the controlling aspect, but just the general outcome. That like the fear of like knowing that if this doesn't turn out ideal for me, it's death. If this doesn't turn out ideal for me, it's, you know.
You live another day.
Right. Yet, why is it that we don't pursue those challenges of whatever it may be in business? Answer, please.
Oh,
Oh,
I don't know if it'll make you feel any better, but I used to have a fear of flying
right.
until I got a job in aviation
Ah,
and met hundreds of pilots and worked with them on a daily, weekly basis and realized how capable they are and how good and how important their job is to them, and then that made me feel better about flying.
that's beautiful because that actually makes me think of what we're afraid of in situations is really just the lack of understanding a situation. So we're afraid of flying just because we don't understand everything that goes on to it. But when you're prepared and have these understandings like you did, you saw the back side of like the entire, like the aviation aspect, it becomes a little bit more relieving to understand something, you know, and that's where judgment comes in. We judge so many things we don't understand because we're afraid of them, because our brains just can't compute something that we don't understand. So we go into this defense mechanism and put ourselves in a situation to judge it so we can assess, because it's a survival tactic essentially, you know. But is
A real estate mentor that we have, he states that that some of us in this group here have. He states, especially with real estate, you know, focus. If your biggest fear is like a failure, maybe talking to a seller or putting in an offer that doesn't get accepted or whatever, and that fear stops you from taking action, well, you're already failing. Like you're already, like the worst case they can say is no. Well, if you don't even try, you're already failing, and it's even worse because plenty of us who have done real estate, especially for a while, failures aren't necessarily like failures in that context when they come with action, because you tend to learn from that. Maybe you won't underestimate your budget for a flip or whatever, right? Whatever the specific scenario is. But the biggest failure is just, and take this positively, but like the biggest failure is just like waiting for the right time or for the right whatever, as opposed to taking action or, you know, or forever learning, like just consuming content and just learning as opposed to just taking action. So yeah, that's like a way to think about failure too, is in a positive light, but like failure of someone saying no or whatever is nothing compared to like you not even ever taking action. That's a failure in itself, is not taking that action.
It's funny, you mentioned the airplane and you asked like, why are we afraid to take risk in business or risk in whatever our goal is, right?
right.
And it's funny because I've never experienced a panic attack in my life before I got my first investment property. And the only reason I bring this up is because I had no idea where it was going to go. I was scared shitless because it was the biggest investment I've ever purchased in my life. And I used most of my savings to do it. And I mean, literally panic attack, man. Like I was like fucking heart attack kind of shit. And I'll tell you what though, after I jumped and did it, you realize that what you were fearful of was just the unknown, the not knowing what was on the other side. And once you get to the other side, you're like, fuck, I'm gonna do it again. Because
God, you guys are setting me up perfectly for my next thing to say.
Great, you know?
It's like when he said the fear is losing a bunch of money. That's
Yeah.
part of the fear when you don't have
A
But-
bunch of money.
But the cool part about real estate, especially if you're a long-term buy and hold investor, is like time is on your side more often than not, especially depending on your market. Like time solves a lot of issues. I mean, there's like, you know, we're in a changing market right now, right? Like it's not the same as it was a year ago or even, a year ago, 8 months ago. But like time is on your side when you take the leap in real estate investing, as opposed to when you never take the leap. Like time is working against you, you know. So
There's a
like
term
real
for
estate's a
that.
lot more forgiving.
The term for that is analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
overthinking.
Yeah.
Well, and in real estate, if you're scared or fearful of airplanes, like go jump in a Cessna. And as far as real estate, like you were mentioning, you got to make those small little tips. Go get in a Cessna. It's a Volkswagen with wings. And when that thing flies, it drops all the time and then climbs back up. So if you get in that Cessna, you'll realize that getting on one of those bigger planes is a lot easier. So like he said, make the jump, you know, get in that little plane, start taking action and start making moves.
Take a lesson and then have the instructor take you up into a stall.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, perfect. Joint venture with people. If you're really
JV
afraid to
install.
take any action, yeah, like joint venture with someone, maybe be the money partner, whatever your situation is, and like learn from someone else, but like while taking action, not just like. And I'm, you know, my wife and I have a decent amount of rentals, but we're not like perfect in this regards. But it's like you learn so much by just taking action, and like working towards that goal. Even if it's not like you're buying a 100-unit multifamily, like the end goal, but like maybe you're joint venturing on single fix and flip or a long-term rental like as a private money lender. I don't know, whatever. Like you can learn from a lot of stuff.
Come on
Yeah,
in.
come on in, man. How you doing?
Good. Come on in.
Sorry,
No. Again, this is more not for me. Come on in.
Go. Next. Go.
I want to be essentially more of a tool to spark this dialogue that we typically don't normally have. Because again, it's a good reminder that we're all thinking these things. Sometimes it just needs some external stimulation to get you in this headspace, because you build confidence off this, especially when everyone is collaborating and feeling like, oh, okay, I think like that, or oh, you're not the only one, you know? And this is what I'm trying to assess about saying, doing this internally, to have this same collaboration and dialogue within yourself with every aspect of yourself, to have this nice, rather than judging, because the way we treat ourselves is not the way we treat others in this context. You know, when we're having these negative thoughts or whatever it might be, or beliefs, it's this, well, why am I thinking this way? Why am I doing this? This guy's not doing it. This girl's not doing it. And we just have this internal battle with ourselves. But with someone else, we're like, hey, sit down. Let's talk about it. What's going on? You know, you try to be more open and understanding to what's happening. So it's really important to understand, to translate the same collaboration internally with yourself. And it's a good thing that you guys were talking about, like the failure and then like these potential consequences of it, because that's the next thing that I wanted to discuss, is that Steve Peters, he's a English psychiatrist, helps elite athletes and whatnot. And he's actually challenging the notion of when his clients come up to him and say, hey man, I'm afraid of failure. And what he says is, you're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of the consequences of failure. And there's a distinct difference, even though it's very similar in you know, the sentence, but essentially it goes like this, that if you tell yourself, I'm afraid of failure, you have to assess, what is failure? It's like this construct that we created, but it's not this tangible thing. So if you say I'm afraid of failure, it's something that it might be very challenging to overcome. But if you tell yourself, I'm afraid of the consequences of failure, and then you understand what those consequences will be, whatever the situation may be, it puts you in this sense of learning to see if you can cope with what that consequence may be. Again, so like in this context, if you fail at the business, you don't make money. But at least you have something tangible to assess. Okay, if I don't make money, can I make money somewhere else? Can I put myself in another situation that'll make me feel like I will be okay? To go through these experiences and say, okay, yeah, I failed, and yeah, I went through this hardship, but I made it out okay. To understanding that the consequences and understanding, learn how to live with them or cope with them completely changes your entire perspective of what failure is. Because the next time you go into any situation, relationship, business, or whatever it may be, and then you tell yourself, I'm not afraid of failure, I'm afraid of the consequences of failure. But I know what those consequences are because I've been through them. And I know how to cope through them because I've done that before. And once you get that ingrained in your head, now you're in a position where the next time failure can present itself, which it will in every aspect of life, it's just a part of it, you'll know, I can get through this. You know? Yeah. Exactly. And that's another... God, you guys are good at this stuff. This brings me to my fifth lesson, and it's 3 C's that I embody myself, again, on a day-to-day life, and that is compassion, curiosity, and collaboration. You want to have compassion for yourself. You know, as I mentioned, we're so hard on ourselves all the time, so self-critical of every action we make. We compare ourselves to, there's another 4th C, compare. But to put yourself in a nurturing standpoint where it's like, it's okay. You know, I'm having this negative thought, but it's okay. Just the way you would be with a loved one. It's okay. Let's talk about it. Really makes that process through whatever you're trying to attain more bearable. Curiosity, as I mentioned, you want to be curious of the thoughts that you have in the mindset that you are creating for yourself to say, this is the way it is. This is how I think. This is this. This is this. And to be more curious. Well, why do I think that way? Why do I have this thought? What led to this thought? What preconceived notions am I going to have now moving forward just because of this thought? You want to be more curious and stimulate your brain with everything. And then collaboration, it's just the most important word. You want to learn to collaborate with yourself in every aspect of yourself, in relationship yourself. You want to work with yourself instead of fight yourself through the whole way of life in every aspect. You want to be able, again, to just have that dinner room talk with the loved ones, but inside yourself, and be in a position to be like, okay, why am I feeling this way? That's okay. How can we move past this? I'm sure you have a purpose of why you're coming up rather than judging it. If we have a bad experience, it's not a bad experience. It's a lesson to retrain your mind into that. Again, goes a very long way. And as it was in the definition, attitude, it really is simply just your attitude, the way you relate to things, which takes you so far in this context, business, to just have the right attitude. What I do is I find the silver lining in every situation that I experience, whether it's good or bad. Obviously, in a bad situation, that's where the silver lining comes into play. If it's a bad situation or a negative situation, what can I take from it? What can I learn from that situation? And if you start to create these habits of finding the positive in literally any situation, you're no longer experiencing life in a bad way, in a negative way, in a failing way. It's just that lesson, or that, okay, this happened because of that. And again, it reshapes the entire way you experience your life, which in turn will make you more sound, more peaceful within, because that's all essentially what we want, is peace of mind, or peace from mind, you know? And that concludes mindset. Same thing. I want you guys to digest it. If you want to just sit here for a little bit, really internalize everything that's, you know, been said from me, from everyone, and just kind of digest that. Sorry. No, man, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. It'll go fast. I didn't anticipate all the like questions, but I love it, you know, so it's good. Oh, thank God. So the last section we'll be talking about is imposter syndrome. So let's understand, just again, a basic definition of what it is. It's a psychological phenomenon in which individuals doubt our accomplishments and feel as if we've only succeeded because of luck or external factors, and completely dismiss our own capability, our own skills, and whatnot. You know, for me, again, leading up to this talk, I'm just contemplating in my head like, oh man, I'm not the right guy to do this. Look at me. I'm like 27 years old. Everyone has more life on me, so how can I be a life coach to give life? Don't you have to experience life? You know, all these constant thoughts that just put me in this state of like, uh-oh, I can't do this. If I say the wrong thing, they're all going to know that I shouldn't be up here, that I am that fraud, you know? And it's a horrible feeling. It's a debilitating feeling. But it hijacks who you really are. Because the imposter syndrome, again, it's a part of you. It's not who you are, you know? Context, again, anything that you do, when you're experiencing this imposter syndrome, it's always a sense of feeling that what happened to you was luck. If someone say, hey, congratulations on selling that house, and then you dismiss them and go, oh no, it wasn't me. Like, I didn't do anything. They already knew what they wanted. You know, you're taking away your own credit and all your hard work to prepare you for that. You know, so understanding that, giving yourself that validation and ability to like feel comfortable and confident in what you do really kind of will deter you away from having those imposter syndromes or this imposter phenomenon. Even as a parent, you know, I mean, not me, but you've experienced a sense of imposter syndrome where it's just like, oh man, like, can I even be a parent? Like, am I going to be a good parent? You know, I don't know how to do this, you know? And then ultimately over time, if you let that influence the way you know, take care of your child, it might put you in a position.
Okay. Sorry.
No, what? It puts you in this position where you might be like overbearing, very protective of your kid, because internally you're like, well, I don't want to mess my kid up, because, you know, I have this belief that if I am more laid back, then they might run into challenges of whatnot. So even in that aspect, imposter syndrome populates in every aspect, not just business. And one of the leading things of imposter syndrome comes simply from just comparing. We compare ourselves, we compare our businesses to other people, to other businesses. And that's the most detrimental thing we can do, because each situation is different in its own way. And it's not a fight you're going to win if I'm going to compare my business to Dane over here, because we have completely different circumstances. Maybe his dad has a lot of money that gave him an opportunity to create a business, and my dad didn't. So why would I compare our businesses to each other when they're completely different circumstances? Again, the only thing that you should be comparing is yourself. That competition should always be internally, how you can be a better person or excel in a better way. Also, another thing that creates this imposter syndrome is society. We have all these external influences that we see online, and people can curate what they want online to make it look as if they're successful in this way. And then we see that, and then we internalize that and go, oh man, yeah, okay, that's success. But really, they're just showing you what they want you to see. So understanding that all these influences actually work against you is also a good way, at least, to detaching yourself from that imposter syndrome. No, that's all good. And with imposter syndrome, once it consumes you, it kind of will disallow you from taking any leaps or any opportunities that you might feel that you're not worthy or credible of moving towards, because now you have this fixed notion that I'm not, capable, I'm not competent, and whatnot. And a good way to evolve from these imposter syndromes is by reminding yourself of how far you've come to this point. The little goals in life take you a long way to remind yourself of what you have accomplished and what you have attained. Which brings me to my last lesson. One way to overcome imposter syndrome is to recognize who the real imposter is. Your negative thoughts. It's not you. It's just a part of you. And if you can recognize that you aren't the imposter because you've worked so hard to get to where you're at, and it's just the negative thoughts, and you can detach yourself from them and observe them for what they are, they won't consume you. You won't become that imposter. You can, again, collaborate, sit down with it, and be like, what is your purpose here? Why are you here? What lesson are you trying to teach me? Which brings me to my final story. And if you've heard it, great, indulge me. But if you haven't, then I hope you enjoy it. And this story is about a farmer and a horse. There's a farmer, and he has this horse. They live on a ranch. And one day, this horse ran away. And the village heard about what happened, so they run to the farmer, and they go, oh man, we heard about what happened to your horse. I'm so sorry. That sucks. We know that was your favorite horse. That's so bad. And the farmer looks at him and says, maybe. Next day, farmer wakes up, looks out, sees the horse, but this time the horse has 4 other horses that came with him. Of course, the village hears about it, runs to the village or to the farmer and goes, wow, this is amazing. Not only do you have your horse back, but now you have 4 other horses. You have 5 horses now. That's so good. And he goes, maybe. The next day, the farmer's son is playing on one of the horses, falls off, breaks his leg. The village comes, tells the farmer, man, we heard about what happened to your son. That's bad. That's so bad luck, and stupid horse. That sucks. That's so bad. Farmer again, maybe. The next day, the military comes into town, and they're recruiting kids, drafting them, and then bringing them on board. And they go to the the farmer, and they see the son with the broken leg. We can't draft this kid. He has a broken leg. He can't do anything for us. So they don't take him. And then one more time, the villagers come to the farmer and they go, wow, they didn't take your son. That's amazing. They took our sons, and now we can't be with our sons. That's so good. And one more time, the farmer says, Maybe. I was curious if anyone knows the moral of this story, or if anyone wants to just blurt out what they think the moral of the story is.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly. Understanding that every situation that you go in, you're never going to see the full picture. You're never going to see the big picture. You're only seeing bits and pieces of it. Really taking yourself out of that situation and seeing and understanding that perspective puts you in a place where you don't have to judge everything that you experience as a good experience or a bad one. Because as the farmer, you see his son, your son falls off and breaks his leg, and it's so easy for all of us to go like, well, shit, our son broke his leg, that's going to be so many medical bills, whatnot. How are you supposed to know that the next day that the army was going to come and now your son doesn't have to go to war because of that? Sometimes the worst things to happen to you in life turn out to be the best things to happen to you in life, and you never knew. So there's no point in indulging in these judgments of good or bad, and then the next time something like this happens to any one of you, rather than assessing it and judging it as that good or that bad, hopefully we could all be like that farmer and kind of just maybe